Good morning, all. Just going to give people just a couple of minutes to join in. I'll get to see some more of the attendees starting to roll in. So just bear with us 1 or 2 minutes and we'll get started. Okay, everybody, thanks for your patience there. I think we've still got a few people rolling in, but we'll maybe get started on the introductions and talk about the session, what we've got ahead today. Do you want to flick to the next slide for me, George? So today we've got an overview of what's new in AVD. We'll also be talking about Windows 365 and doing a bit of a dive into one of our favourite partners, Nerdio, who we find tremendously useful when we're working with AVD and Windows 365. Today you'll be George Zajkowski will be presenting to you, and he'll take over in a few minutes. George is one of our senior cloud engineers and has worked on the AVD projects over the last 18 months, almost predominantly right on that sector. Lots of experience in end user compute, as he'll explain, and has delivered, like I say, over 40 projects for us in the last 18 months. And I'm Paul Heaton, co-founder of cubesys. Let's have a quick chat about what we do and what we've been up to. Well, nice bright slide for you there to wake you up this morning. And there's a list of our clients and some of the clients we've been working with. So we've got a vast array of different clients that we've worked with, from small not-for-profits and healthcare to large government agencies. And in a couple of those cases, we're now looking at into thousands of users being deployed using AVD. And we've got some great success stories with response to remote worker use cases. For example, when COVID first hit, we were able to get some of the government departments working from home very, very quickly by replicating their SOE and putting it out there. Some lovely comments that we got back from our client base. There's also what we're finding with VDI, and George will talk about this a bit later on, is that we're seeing for the first time, I think, in this technology stack, the ability to work with some quite unique use cases. And what I mean by that is things like developer desktops and engineering desktops and scientists running heavy duty models. For the first time, I think VDI can really address those points and bring something new to the table. Of course, we're still doing a lot of the multi-session productivity users and publishing of apps and all that type of thing. That's all still there, like you're used to with VDI, but we've also seen some new use cases coming up, even SecOps and IT sort of jump boxes and things where we need particular applications on board. So with that, I think I've just got one more slide before I hand over to George, and I just wanted to point out again some of our experience at cubesys here. So as I mentioned, we have done over 40 deployments in the last 18 months of AVD, from small and agile ones all the way up to some very large, like 5,000-10,000 users bracket. And we're very proud to have been the very first Microsoft partner to achieve the Windows Virtual Desktop, or now Azure Virtual Desktop, advanced specialization. What that means, if you're not across this yet, is Microsoft, on top of having gold partners, which of course cubesys is and has been for many years, they now come in and assess us on particular workloads or things, and they actually come in and audit cubesys and how we work, how we present our paperwork, and etc., and look at deeply look at how we deliver solutions to our clients, and then we can achieve an advanced specialization if we get past that, which I'm very pleased to announce we were the first ones in Australia to achieve that. Okay, with that, I'm going to pass over to George. Please, one final thing, so I almost forgot, sorry, Katie and co. We would love to hear from you during this session. There is the opportunity to ask questions. We have a couple of the team members at the back end there that can answer technical questions. And we're also really keen to understand if this type of session is useful to you. Like I said, today's an overview, but of all those changes and new pieces in the VDI stack. But would you like to hear this from us on sort of a monthly or 6 weekly basis where we can deep dive into some of the points again? So please let us know via the chat, and we'll of course send out some collateral and ask questions post event as well. All right. And with that, I'm going to hand over to George. All right.
Awesome. Cheers. Thanks, Paul. Hey everyone, so as Paul mentioned, my name is George Zakowski. I'm one of the senior cloud consultants here at cubesys, and I've been specializing in all things end user compute, so Citrix, VMware, Horizon, Virtual Apps Desktops, AVD, all of that stuff, SCCM, etc. I hope everyone's excited to go down a rabbit hole. I'm just going to switch my camera off because my computer's fan is going full blast, so plus I'm sure you don't want to see my head the entire time. But I hope everyone's excited to go down a rabbit hole today because I've got a lot to cover. Like Paul said, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. And if there is some time left over at the end, we can probably have a discussion. So hopefully everyone on the call already knows what Azure Virtual Desktop is, but for those of you that don't, it was formerly Windows Virtual Desktop, now rebranded as Azure Virtual Desktop, and it's Microsoft's Azure-based system for publishing virtual apps and desktops in the cloud, and it's primarily aimed at enterprise customers rather than individual users. And I think that's why they have brought in Windows 365, which I'll cover sort of towards the end, aka Cloud PC, for sort of more smaller business users. So with that, let's just dive into a quick overview video on what AVD looks like to the end user. And then I'll tell you what you need to consider when deploying AVD. Awesome. So as you can see from the video, the user experience is like any other Windows 10 desktop. So basically your users are very familiar with the same look and feel when using an AVD environment. Some of the benefits around Azure Virtual Desktop, obviously you can see there, it supports OneDrive natively, Teams optimization, Office 365, and best of all, your users have the freedom to connect to Azure Virtual Desktop from anywhere in the world over the internet, or via a new feature called RDP Short Path, which I'll get into a little bit later. So why would you basically choose Azure Virtual Desktop? There are many use cases around this. Your users may need to be able to work from home. So obviously with the recent pandemic, a lot of companies have sent their users home. We've been able to provision, SOE full-blown desktops managed by the customer to allow their staff to work remotely and securely. It's actually a lot cheaper as well to run AVD than other traditional environments, like, for example, Citrix or Horizon, because you're not actually paying for any license costs. You're only paying for the storage and the compute costs. You also don't need to run any additional gateway servers or brokers or anything like that you otherwise would have to do when you do an on-prem environment. It gives you the flexibility to publish, full-blown desktops, individual remote applications from single host pools, or you can create groups, or you can publish both. You can use custom images, you can bring your own images, or you can rebuild, sort of using a Windows 10 multi-session image. It works with pretty much all of your apps and devices, so Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, and there's a web browser as well. And it also has the ability to provide individual or persistent desktops similar to what Windows 365 does. The other benefit of Azure Virtual Desktop is you can reduce your costs by pooling multiple users on a single session host and utilize something like auto scaling to start and stop VMs as needed. And finally, it's a really secure environment. So it basically allows you to apply all your existing conditional access policies and multi-factor authentication to the server, so you can really lock it down if you needed to. There's also an option to run Windows 7 with free extended support till January 2023. So if that's something, you might have some on-prem apps, some legacy apps that are still running in Windows 7, you've still got that sort of support till the end of January 2023. And then you've also got some additional benefits and features of AVD, like screen capture protection. So, if you don't want your users to take screenshots, you can sort of blank that out. You've got VM start on connect. So when users connect, if the virtual machine in the background is powered off or auto scaling hasn't kicked in yet, it will notify the user, hey, please wait while we power your VM on to save those costs in Azure. Again, it's still got the the OneDrive, the Teams optimization, so your video and your camera are passed through. There's no lag. It's actually the end user's computer that's making the connection and not VM to VM. And then you can consolidate all of your images with additional tools like FSLogix, application masking, MSI app attach. So you can move away from the traditional fat image that you would deploy with hundreds of applications down to like a really slim core OS that you can deploy with basically layered applications on top, or you can hide applications from some users, and I'll get into a little bit of detail later on with that. The final benefit with this is you don't need RDS cows anymore. So when you go to a Windows desktop, like Windows 10 multi-session, you're not paying for RDS cows, obviously. And if you have existing licenses in your environment, you can utilize them. And you're probably already licensed for AVD. I've got a slide later on with some of those licensing stuff, so you can have a look and see. You might already be able to spin it up. So what does a traditional video environment look like on-prem? Basically, we've got all of these key components that we need to provision when we do traditional VDI. So we've got, entitlement, brokering, image management, licensing, server storage, all of this stuff that we need to look after and maintain. Whereas with Azure Virtual Desktop, Microsoft manages a lot of that stuff for us. So all the brokering, the licensing, all of that stuff is handled by Microsoft, and us as the sort of the IT admins, we literally look after the entitlement and the image management and some networking components in the background. So a lot of that heavy lifting is taken away from us. What do we manage exactly? Well, on the left hand side, we don't need to worry about that because it's managed by Microsoft, but over on the right hand side, we've got things like desktops where we need to determine what we want to push to our end users, whether it be shared, pooled, or personal desktops. We've got things like applications that we can publish, so we can select if we want to, if we're not pushing desktops, we can push a remote application to groups or users. We've got full control over the image, so you can bring your own SOE. You can create a Azure Gallery image. You can do whatever you want. You can build it with SCCM if you've got a task sequence for that kind of stuff. Completely flexible. There's a couple of profile management stuff. So, you can configure FSLogix with storage solutions like Azure Files to basically containerize your user profiles. If we don't use, any profile management, these VMs will get filled up pretty quickly with random user profiles on each machine, and we need to figure out a way to remove that. So that's where FSLogix comes in. And we're also looking at, size and scaling, so auto scaling. Sizing of the VMs, we can include things like GPU enabled VMs. We can specify whether we want to load balance in a depth first or breadth first load balancing method. So that's basically saying when the first server hits 10 users, then spin up a second server, or we can evenly distribute that load across different servers. Also, our networking policies. So you can connect your Azure Virtual Desktop VNet to your on-premise network by using VPN or ExpressRoute. And then finally, the user management and identity piece, which is basically, Azure AD, role-based access controls, conditional access, multi-factor, that kind of thing. I mentioned shared and pooled desktops earlier, so I just want to quickly run through some of the use cases or advantages between the two. So typically with a pooled desktop, what we have is we would have one server or a bunch of servers where basically multiple users are logging into that server. So it's traditionally a Windows 10 multi-session environment. So multi-session users and single session workloads with light to medium usage. You can basically choose the right VM to run whatever applications you need. So you'd spec the VM appropriately to handle the number of users and what they're actually doing inside the environment. So you can have pretty much 100 smaller VMs, all having your users log in, or you can have 100 larger VMs and have users logging into them. It really depends on how you size and scale those VMs versus what you're actually doing inside the virtual environment. If you've got any users that are sort of more heavy usage, power users, each user will either get their own personal desktop, or you can do personal desktops that are sort of floating like a traditional VMware Horizon environment where one user logs into a random VM each time. And that's something that Nerdio can provide. I don't think it's native at the moment, but there are some different use cases for that. So typically what we'd use these personal desktops for is applications like CAD that require a GPU in the background, or someone needs a persistent VM, they need administrator access, something like that. That's how we can sort of split the workload up between the two environments. And then finally, just down the bottom there, you only pay for the virtual machine storage and networking consumed when the service is in use. So basically, AVD is a consumption-based model. If you're not using it, you're not paying for it. That's pretty much what it comes down to. Here are some use cases that might be an example of where you might look at deploying AVD. So for example, if you're in financial services, you might look at using AVD, and you might want to turn on screen capture protection so that no one can take screenshots of any, documentation, things like that. You might be in the middle of a company merger. You can deploy AVD in a multi-forest environment, and then, leverage sort of both company A and company B to allow them to log into an environment. You might have contractors or partners that need to come in and do a bit of work. So you might have, a personal VM that's always powered off. When the contractor comes in, the VM powers on. They use it for that session. They can shut it down and use it that way. And then finally, we've got that high performance computer scenario with the GPU. So again, if you've got any sort of high performance compute requirements, AutoCAD, 2Flow, Revit, any of that stuff, you can definitely take advantage of any GPU skewed VMs. Another fun one I did when GPUs were first announced, I actually installed Microsoft Flight Simulator on the AVD environment. This was on a NV6 SKU, and yeah, it actually ran pretty well. So that was fun. I think this is going to be the future of gaming, by the way. Just stream the game to the end user. Moving along. Here are some of the key components, basically that make up your AVD environment. So you've got identity there, so multi-factor authentication, conditional access. You can look at blocking all locations except for trusted IPs, for example, your office, and block the rest of the world. You've got devices there, Microsoft Endpoint Protection, Windows Defender, SCCM, Intune. In networking component, AVD uses reverse connect technology, so you don't need to open any ports, and I'll get into that a little bit later. And then you've got firewalls, so you can integrate it with your existing firewalls, use Azure Firewall with service tags for ease of use. You can use network security groups. You can apply everything that Azure offers today to AVD, and they also support things like disk encryption, Gen 2 VMs with TPM chips, Azure Sentinel, Security Center, Key Vault, all of that stuff can be applied to AVD. So how do our users connect? So basically on the left-hand side, we've got our clients. In the middle, we've got the AVD service. And on the far right, we've got the stuff that we own and maintain. So typically what happens is that number one there's an agent running on the AVD servers themselves that connects to the broker using 443 outbound reverse connect technology. So no ports need to be open to this VM. It's always phoning home. When the user launches the AVD client, it connects to Azure AD, the user signs in, and the Azure AD token is returned to the user. The AVD client then presents a token to the web access server, queries the database to determine which resources are authorized for the user. The user then selects a desktop or remote app, and AVD client connects to the gateway. The broker orchestrates connection from host agent to the gateway. So at this point now, all traffic now flows between the remote desktop client and the session host VM over connections 4 and 5. So essentially going via the gateway service to get to our VMs. There's also another way, which is RDP short path. I'll cover that in the next couple of slides, but it's basically bypassing this service altogether. If you've got a bad sort of WAN connection, you got like Express Route that you want to utilize, you want to do some QoS, things like that. I'll go into that in a little bit. Here is a typical AVD architecture overview. So over on the left-hand side, we've got our on-premise network. We've got our domain controllers and whatever file servers, etc. We've got an express route connection into our VNet in Azure. We've got our traditional resources deployed. Where AVD fits into this diagram is we've got the Windows Virtual Desktop or AVD Virtual Desktop control plane at the top. Then we've got a subnet of servers, whether they be single session, multi-session, it doesn't matter. They are just basically a collection of servers. So we've got host pool A and host pool B. And then on top of that, we've also got Azure files or some sort of storage on the back end to basically mount the FSLogix profiles, to mount any MSIX applications or anything else that we basically want to pass through to the machines. So what do we need to deploy AVD? So we basically need Azure subscription, Azure Active Directory. That can be, Active Directory, Azure Active Directory domain services, or just recently they've released Azure Active AAD join. So Azure AD join. Some other resources that we're going to need is images, a VNet, storage account, and then finally the credentials to basically spin up the service. There's also a resource provider that needs to be enabled on the subscription. I think it's desktop.virtualization that needs to be turned on to be able to spin up the service. Just want to cover a little bit around FSLogix. So I mentioned earlier, FSLogix is basically the containerization of user profiles. So if we didn't have FSLogix, we'd have a whole bunch of virtual machines with random user profiles on there. So it's pretty much a container that roams the user profile in a VHD file, and it dynamically attaches to a VM whenever a user logs in. FSLogix also includes application masking and Java control. So with application masking, we can hide applications based on users or groups. And then with the Java control component, it basically allows you to assign a specific version of Java to a website or URL so that it forces it to run using that particular version of Java. Couple of different storage options for FSLogix because we're basically mounting the container to the virtual machine. We need that storage to be pretty quick to be able to handle all the read writes. So some of the different options for FSLogix are Azure NetApp files, Azure files, and the traditional file server cluster. Depending on how many users you're looking to deploy in your environment, let's say anything over 200-300, you're probably best looking at Azure NetApp files. It basically provides the fastest sub-millisecond latency for your containers. Otherwise, file servers and Azure Files Premium are probably the way to go for sort of your POC and low user count. The way FSLogix Pro containers work. Here we can see the user signs into the remote desktop client. The user then gets associated to a VM or a session host use case. The VM then gets the user profile from the Azure file share or the NetApp files or file servers, whatever you're hosting it on, but basically the VHD is mounted to the session host. If you're doing things like MSI app attach and you have those sort of VHDs living in the Azure file share as well, that would then get dynamically attached to the user session. And then finally, the user will log in, able to have their profile there, have their applications listed. When they log off, the VHD is then detached from the virtual machine, and it's stored in the Azure file share. The next time they log in, they may hit a new virtual machine, and that's where basically it'll roam with the user and apply accordingly. So licensing, are you eligible? Like I said earlier, you are probably already eligible to run AVD in your environment today. So over on the left-hand side for Windows 10 and Windows 7, customers are already eligible to access Windows single and multi-session and Windows 7 if they have one of the following licenses. So if you've got any of those licenses on the left-hand side, oh, I'm back. I think I dropped off there for a second. So yes, basically, if you've got any of those licenses on the left, you're covered for AVD. Over on the right-hand side, Windows Server licenses. If you've got any RDS CALs with software assurance, you're also eligible to spin up Windows Server-based operating systems in AVD. Again, at the bottom there, you only pay for the virtual machine storage and networking consumed when the users are using the service. So just remember that. I spoke about RDP short path earlier. So basically, diagram of what RDP short path is. So you can now connect directly to your session hosts. The client switches to a UDP connection. If the short path is detected, you can apply QoS rules and it's a smoother experience for your users. So if I just zoom in over here a little bit, traditionally what happens, the client will contact the broker in the public internet and be sort of tunneled via the gateway service to the gateway machine itself. What happens when RDP short path is enabled? This connection still happens initially, but then the actual client on the user's machine, physical machine, if that has line of sight to the virtual machine running in Azure via express route, it will then drop this connection seamlessly and connect via RDP short path in the background. So it'll use UDP 3390, so like it'll RDP to it direct in the background. So that might be a good use case for you. It basically provides a much smoother experience for your end users. So Azure Virtual Desktop itself, you've got the Microsoft control plane, but you can also integrate AVD with Citrix and VMware. So you can utilize VMware Horizon's Cloud Suite to manage AVD. You can use Citrix Cloud to manage it. So if you've already got some of those licenses and you want to, utilize Windows 10 multi-session, that's primarily why they're integrating this. Windows 10 multi-session is only available on Azure. So to be able to take advantage of those Windows 10 multi-session machines, you would need to have a connector into an Azure cloud from Citrix or VMware. There's also Enterprise, which sort of ties into AVD, and it's a sort of, I guess, another competitor to VMware and Horizon and Citrix in a way. So Nerdio Manager for Enterprise basically overlays on top of your existing AVD environment to provide you with things like advanced auto-scaling, some cool dashboards. It does some cost savings, image management and deployment, automation, and just general sort of management of the entire piece. It's actually got some internal RBAC rules that you can apply to get granular permissions and see who's got access to what. And Nerdio is basically a standard standalone Azure application that's deployed into your Azure subscription, and it's deployed through the Azure Marketplace. So if you're interested in that, you can go to the Marketplace and deploy it. Step-by-step instructions that they have make the process really, really easy to deploy. So if you're interested, they offer a 30-day free trial on that. Going into some of the nitty-gritty around what Nerdio has got to offer, I guess some key awesome features of Nerdio include things like auto healing session host. So getting into the broker and it's offline for whatever reason, it can reboot the machine maybe once, twice, 3 times, or whatever the case is. And depending on if it's come back good or not, you can have a Nerdio turn around and say, okay, well, I'm going to delete this VM and create it again from the gold image, or I'm just going to leave it alone and just throw an error and then, have someone come in and manually look at it and try and fix it. Another component of Nerdio, you've got auto provisioning of like a burst VM. So traditionally with a Azure Virtual Desktop environment, the native Microsoft auto scaling gives you the capability to scale based on number of users per CPU core, whereas Nerdio has got some stuff like CPU, RAM usage, number of spare sessions to keep available. They've got a little bit more automation around what it can do versus the native solution. And one of those things is burst VMs. So basically, if we have a host pool of 20 virtual machines, there might be times where, we don't want our users to, if we get an influx of users, or maybe we send them to work from home or whatever the case is, if there are not enough VMs, the burst mode will actually provision up to 5, 10, 20, whatever you want to specify, and it'll spin up additional VMs beyond your sort of base host pool capacity. It's also got some things like storage auto scaling. So with Azure File Premium and Azure NetApp files, you can basically spin up a pre-provisioned storage account at say 5 terabytes volume, and that's going to give you, a specific throughput amount. If you go bigger than 5 terabytes, well, then the speed of that storage account increases. So you might have scenarios where users log in the morning, typically 8 a.m. and you find that your users saying, it's slow, it's taking a little bit long to log in. What the storage auto scaling will do, it'll actually perform in the back end for you and allow you to get more throughput for a couple of hours, and then it'll scale the storage back in. That's provided that you obviously haven't filled up the entire storage space with additional users. So it's got to have enough storage to scale back in. I mentioned before I had the advanced auto scale. No longer need to, log into a Azure virtual machine, make your changes, shut it down, snapshot it, power it back on, run a sysprep, shut it down, convert that to an image. It's a bit of a tedious process. What Nerdio offer is image management for. So you go in, you click a button, say power the virtual machine on. You go in there, you make your changes, you go back to the Nerdio portal and say set this as my image. Done. It handles all of that for you in the background. It's really awesome, and some of our customers really love that. And it's also got the RBAC roles within Nerdio that can help you, get granular as to who's got access to what. It's got a help desk tool and an end user sort of support tool to allow end users to power on and power off their own virtual machines, which is not a native function as of yet in AVD. Here is, I guess, what Nerdio actually deploys in your environment if you were to take advantage of it. So it actually deploys the web app, log analytics workspace, Azure SQL, App Insights, Key Vault automation, and Nerdio has no access to your tenant. So the connection that you see there, the number 3 is literally for reporting metrics. So yeah, there's no data being pushed over to Nerdio in terms of users. Here's what the dashboards look like. So apologies for this. I had to take a couple of screenshots from a customer. So there are some things that I've hidden. But basically, this is the top level dashboard here within the last 30 days. It shows you some of the auto scaling savings. If you have auto scale turned on, that is. So this customer is saving $824 just by using Nerdio to turn it off and on VMs. It gives you some information around how many users have logged into your environment, if there are any issues, things like that. We've got the dynamic host pools component here. So this particular customer's got 10, 12 host pools, and here we can see how many users are currently logged in, how many servers are running, how many groups are there. Are we auto scaling? If we are, what times are we pre-staging hosts? What time are we scaling in and scaling out? What image did we use for that particular host pool, and when was it last patched or last deployed? And then finally, we've got the monthly savings and costs over on the far right-hand side. Going further into the scaling component, so here's some of the stuff that you can look at utilizing. So you've got host pool sizing, scaling logics, pre-staging hosts, messaging, auto healing brokes. All of these features are available with Nerdio, and you can take advantage of them to sort of ramp up your AVD environment. Finally, we've got some automation, scripted actions, Azure runbooks, Windows scripts, etc. So if you want to push things out to your virtual machines, you can do it from Nerdio. And some customers have used scripted actions in the past to build brand new images every single month using the Azure Marketplace image. So if that's something you want to do, a bit of automation, you can definitely utilize this. cubesys and Nerdio are partners, so if you're interested in Nerdio, we're an official partner, so reach out to us, we can help you. Let's go into the Windows 365 stuff now. For those of you that don't know, Windows 365 or Cloud PC is a new offering from Microsoft that offers organizations a fixed monthly price subscription to a Cloud PC that is dedicated to a user and can be managed using the exact same tools as a traditional Windows PC. There are 2 versions of Cloud PC, Enterprise and Business. The Cloud PC is available at a flat per user price, whereas Azure Virtual Desktop is based on consumption costs. So if you shut everything down, you're not going to get charged for it. The Cloud PCs use the same broker URL service as AVD, but Windows 365 does not have the availability to publish remote applications. It can only do desktops and personal desktops at this stage. Just play a quick little intro video on 365, and then we'll get into a demo as well.
This is a Cloud PC. And so is this. And this. And this. Now any device can be a Cloud PC with Windows 365. Hybrid work is here. With Windows in the cloud, embrace flexibility in how, when, and where you work. Streaming your personalized Windows experience from the Microsoft Cloud. Your Cloud PC is always current, so pick up where you left off. All your apps, content, and settings, ready wherever your work takes you. Integrated management and security, with everything in the cloud. Scale on demand to meet your needs. With company-owned or personal devices, all one seamless experience that's just a few clicks to deploy. The world of work has changed, so we're changing how you get Windows. streamed from the cloud to any device to unlock your business's full potential. Hybrid Windows for a hybrid world. Welcome to Windows 365.
Awesome. So basically what they're trying to push there is it's a cloud PC and it's available all the time. I just thought I'd talk a little bit around some of the integration and how that fits in with your particular environment, depending on what SKU you go with. So I guess the key takeaway here is looking at the diagram. There's a diagram from Nerdio, by the way. If you want to read up any sort of more into Windows 365, definitely check out their blog articles. They have a really, really good explanation around what Windows 365 is and some comparisons. And I've got some of those screenshots to show you in the next coming slides. But basically, the enterprise editions are tied to your VNet and they can access all of your on-prem resources, whereas the business cloud PCs are Azure AD joined and don't have access to any on-prem resources. So down the bottom here, we can see the enterprise cloud PCs. The NIC is injected into the VNet. We don't actually see the VM in our Azure subscription because it runs in, I guess, M365 cloud. So we don't see it, but we do see the NIC attached to the VNet and we can access on-prem resources. With the business cloud stuff, there's no VNet injection. They're sort of standalone machines, 100% cloud, no on-prem access. So I guess that's a key takeaway there. I'm just going to jump into a really quick Windows 365 provisioning demo. It's interesting. There we go. Basically, I need to assign myself an Intune license and a Windows 365 license. So if we go under licenses, I've already done that. So I've got an Intune license and a Windows 365 license. Depending on what license you have, the SKUs will be different. So there's a couple of different versions of VMs that you can deploy. I'll show you guys in a little bit, but they're basically the two things that you need to have assigned to your user. And then over in the Microsoft Endpoint Manager portal, go over to devices. You'll see the Windows 365 blade on the left here. The first thing you need to do is provision a on-premise network. Really simple. You just follow the bouncing ball, set up your on-prem network, select your subscription, your resource group, your VNet, and then your subnet. Hit next. Enter your domain join credentials. And an OU, hit review and create, and then it'll go ahead and check that the connection's successful and it can talk to your domain controller, etc. Once that's done, you need to create a provisioning policy. Here's one that I've already created, and basically what this is I'm saying this is the name of the policy. I'll just call it policy for now. The on-premise network location is the connection that we just created. You have an image type. You can select a custom image or a gallery image. I'm just using a gallery image. And then finally, which group of users are we pushing this policy to? So I've pushed these to WVD users. Tony Stark is a member of WVD users. So anybody in the WVD users group will gain access to, or will get a cloud PC provisioned for them, provided that they have the license assigned to them. So once that happens, you'll have a cloud PC. There's one there, it's been provisioned. Tony Stark's the user, that's the device name there. I don't actually see this in my Azure tenant, but I do see the NIC if I was to go into virtual networks. I should be able to see the NIC that's been injected because I am using the Enterprise Edition, and I'm pretty sure it's that one there. So it's joined to, I guess, to my my tenant. From there, we just go to Windows 365.microsoft.com. Select the account that we're logged in with. There's my cloud PC. It's called policy because I named the policy, but if you want to give a user-friendly name, you can do that. And I think, users can rename their VMs as well. But basically, if you wanted to log into this VM, just open it up in a browser. You can use a browser. You can use the Azure Virtual Desktop app, which I'll show you in a little bit. But basically, that's our cloud PC. And that'll log in a minute. That's my password. Submit. And that's logging in. Just show you real quick, this is the Azure Virtual Desktop client. So this is my tenant. I've pushed remote applications as well as desktops here, but you can use this client for Windows 365, and that's how it appears to the end user if they are using Windows 365. I'm not sure, I'm pretty sure that they'll change the name of this, but for whatever reason, it's sort of called the SKU name. So it might be a bit confusing to your users, but I guess that they'll make that change soon, hopefully. So that'll log in a little bit. It's a really small size VM, 1 CPU, 2 gigs of RAM, so it'll probably take a little while. So while that's loading, I'll just jump back over to the slide deck. Here are some of the Cloud PC enterprise costs. So if you're looking at deploying this in your environment, you've got the SKUs on the left-hand side there, and you've got the pricing on the right-hand side. One thing to note with this is no matter which SKU you go with, you're still going to be paying egress costs on your network. Okay, I think that's in small text somewhere on their website, so I just thought I'd mention that to you. The other thing as well is this price here is a flat rate fixed price for a VM running 24/7. Okay, so whether the VMs are on or off, I don't think you can shut it down, but it's going to be that flat rate the whole time. So do we go AVD or do we go Windows 365, and how do we decide that? This slide from Nerdio is really, really good. They spell it out in plain black and white. So if we got less than 10 desktops or no current planned Azure footprint, you're probably better off going to Windows 365. Do you have little or no desktop infrastructure virtualization experience and are already using Microsoft Endpoint to manage physical desktops? If you are, then maybe go Windows 365. Otherwise, do your end users require local admin rights? If they do, yes, and they need to run a desktop for more than 55 hours a week, then yeah, go for Windows 365, might be beneficial. Do they need remote app streaming? Yes, well then Azure Virtual Desktop's the way to go. If they don't, or go back over to Windows 365. You've got a quality of virtual desktops needed that fluctuates throughout the month. So scaling up, down. Again, Azure Virtual Desktop's probably the best place to go. And then lastly, cost is primary. You can do consumption-based model with Azure Virtual Desktop, whereas the other one's flat rate. So it might actually be cheaper for you to spin up one virtual machine with a pretty big SKU, like 32 cores, for example, and have 50 people logging into that VM and then shut it down at night. That might be more cost effective for you. Lastly, little side-by-side comparison from our guys over at Nerdio. So basically, which control plane does each one use? You've got Windows 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop. They both use the same control plane, like I just showed you earlier. In terms of Azure subscriptions, with AVD, the customer manages the entire subscription. With Windows 365 or Cloud PC, pretty much Microsoft manages the whole component except for the networking piece if you go the enterprise path, because the NIC is injected in your VNet, so you can control networking there. As for compute, Microsoft manages the compute at a fixed cost. AVD is customer managed, right? So again, consumption based. Your storage requirements over on the left-hand side, Microsoft managed fixed costs. There's multiple storage sizes and service level DR. Over on the right-hand side, you've got things like OS disks, temp disks, FS logics, customer managed. You can back it up. You've got more flexibility over on the right-hand side. Again, networking, so AVDs, customer managed, usage-based costs. You can do, your own routing, your own security. Over on the left-hand side, it's a little bit more limited as what can and can't do. FSLogix user profiles. So basically, again, on the left-hand side, because we're not doing Windows 10 multi-session, they are local profiles and they're stuck to the VM. On the right-hand side, we can use FSLogix. So we've got the option to use it for pooled or personal VMs, completely up to you. It just helps with migrating a user from one VM to another later on. One thing I just want to note here is on the left-hand side with Windows 365, when you do use local profiles, if somebody was to go in and accidentally delete a virtual machine or remove a license or whatever the case is, the VM itself actually goes into a grace period of 7 days. So the user still has 7 days from when the license was removed to be able to log into their VM and take whatever files off that VM that they need that may be stored in their user profile. So when you decommission a VM in Windows 365, it doesn't happen straight away. It gives you a bit of a grace period. Of course, you could still go in there and force remove it if that's what you want to do. And then the identity piece, over on the right-hand side, AADS is required. Windows AD or Azure AADS is supported. On the left-hand side, it's a hybrid Azure AD join for enterprise and a Azure AD join for business. That's basically a good side-by-side comparison of the two. If you're interested in reading more about the differences between Windows Virtual Desktop and Azure Virtual Desktop, like I said, Nerdio's got some really good articles on their website, so go over there and have a look. Finally, some demos. I don't think I have enough time to go over all of them. What I might just show is probably the one that everyone will be interested in is the app masking and the MSIX app attach components. So I'll see if I can be quick with this. So I'm just going to log into my Windows 10 multi-session desktop in my tenant. Oops, I've clicked it about 4 times. It's kicked me off the first session. Always fun doing a live demo. Come on. There we go. Cool, so I'm logged into my Windows 10 multi-session desktop. I've already got FSLogix installed. I've got a rules editor installed. What I'll show you first is basically how you can use FSLogix application masking to hide an application in your environment. So I'll just close this down. So once you install the rules editor, actually I might just open this up in administrative mode to show you. Yes. So let's just use an example of, I don't know, VLC media player. So on the desktop, I'd say hide VLC. I'll give it a rule set name. And then basically we can choose from any of the installed applications on the computer, or we can browse to a specific install path if it's not shown here. I've had some applications that don't show up here, and you need to provide the path manually. But basically for VLC, we're going to select it. It's going to scan all the registry, all the shortcuts, everything related to that application. So here's all of this stuff that refers to VLC. What we can do then is look at the user assignments. So if VLC was a licensed application, what I can do is say add a user, and I can add Tony Stark here. And I'll move, so these rules are top down, by the way. So what we can say is I want Tony Stark to have access to VLC but everybody else, I want this hide VLC to apply to everybody else, and that will basically hide the application from everyone except Tony. I can go in here, I can add groups, processes, network locations, sort of very similar to what group policy applies. But for this example, I'll apply. So let's just hide it from everybody on the machine. Hit this little button here. And there you go, VLC is gone. If I was to log off and log back in this virtual machine, there will be no traces of VLC. If I go into the start menu here and type VLC, we'll see the icon there now, only because I haven't logged out, logged back in. But typically you'd have these rule sets apply when the computer comes up online. So you would have your FSLogix rule sets. So these two files here that it's just created, you would have them sitting on a share somewhere, and you'd use something like group policy or a script to copy these files into the directory where they need to go, which I think is program files, FSLogix, apps, and then rules. So as soon as these files are copied to this on all of your session hosts, VLC will disappear for whatever groups you've basically determined here. So that's number one. The second one is app attach. So I've already created some app attach applications, and I'm just going to show you that Winamp and nremote mg are not installed. So there's no Winamp here, there's no nremote mg. But if I look at my disk management, we should see 3 virtual disks, 1 for my profile and 2 for the 2 applications that I'm pushing via MSIX. There's the, let me make this bigger. There's the profile. That one there is Winamp, that one there is nremote ng, and I know that because that's the size of the VHDs that I created, but they basically dynamically attach whenever I log into a VM. If there were other users logged on here, we'd see a whole bunch of other user profiles being attached as well. Just to show you what those files look like, here are the files themselves. I've got KeyPass, nremote ng, Winamp, WinRAR, etc. And then over on the profile side, I've got all of these random users here. But if we look at the Tony Stark one that I'm logged in at the moment, there's my profile size. That's basically the profile that gets dynamically mounted upon login. Now, nremote ng is not actually installed, but if I go into the start menu or Winamp, whatever, if I click on Winamp, it should, fingers crossed, there you go. It launches Winamp. So Winamp is not installed. It was mounted to my session as a VHD, and using the power of smoke and mirrors, it's basically launched it for the application. So a good use case for this is if somebody's got a licensed application that's tied to a specific user, but you don't want to create a separate session host or server farm for that user, you would basically create an MSIX app attach package, assign it to that user, and then that way it will follow that user around. I'm just going to show you real quick in the Azure portal. By the way, there's that cloud PC. It finally logged in, and because I've got OneDrive Sync enabled, it's actually synced those files, that VLC stuff that I just created, which is pretty cool. If I go back over to my Azure subscription, sorry, my tenant, go into Azure Virtual Desktop, host pools. There's the Windows 10 host pool 1 multi-session. That's what I've called it. If we look at MSIX packages, this is where you actually mount those MSIX packages. So I've got nremote ng and Winamp, and then I've actually got the storage path that I'm calling them from, and they are mounted, or they're presented to the session host here. But then to actually present them to an end user, you need to create an application group with the 2 applications that you want to publish. And then you say who you want to publish it to. So if these were licensed applications, I'd obviously only put 1 person in here, but I'm publishing it to a group of users. So anybody that logs in will get those applications dynamically mounted. Cool. That comes to the end of the session. Look at that, bang, right on 12 o'clock. So hopefully that's been of use to you. I'm not sure if Paul's still online with us. Paul, are you there?
Yes, sir. Thank you. That's a great demo again, George. Awesome. Looking there. Probably, as we mentioned at the beginning, it'd be really great to hear from everybody who's attended about what they'd like to see next, because we would love to deep dive into some of those other areas. So things that come to mind are some of the Nerdio configuration and how we use that to build and manage images, and how we use that to scale up and down at the back end. We could dive into more detail in that, or any other subject that you'd be interested in. So we'll reach out and ask about that in the near future. But I think awesome. That's probably a wrap for us today, George, and thanks very much again. It's a great session.
No worries, and thank you for everyone for attending. Hopefully something useful has come out of that for you, and if you have any questions, please reach out to us.